Really appreciate everybody being here. We're excited to start this kind of series of webinars that we hope to do throughout the course of this year, all centered around this idea of the future of FinOps is CloudOps. If you're familiar with Kion, you've probably seen this messaging over the last several months. I did a presentation at AWS reInvent, kind of covering this topic and what it means and how a tool like Kion is essentially making it a core part of our product strategy. And so for folks that are brand new to Kion or myself, I'll do a kind of refresher of what we mean when we say the future of FinOps is CloudOps. And then we're going to dive into a specific topic around waste. And this idea of eliminating waste is great, but preventing it is even better. Before we do that, I'll do a kind of high-level introduction to myself. So my name is Tatum Tummins, Senior Product Manager here at Kion. Been here for about a year and a half now. Prior to coming over to the vendor side, I was a practitioner myself for a little over 7 years at a large healthcare company. I like to say that I kind of grew up in my professional career alongside FinOps, right? I started before it was a term anyone used or talked about. And then slowly as I kind of honed in on like my abilities and my understanding of the cloud and how to do things like prevent waste, FinOps took off in awareness. And so the timing kind of worked out. And so now I'm over on the vendor side trying to bring some of my experience and challenges that I faced as a practitioner to Kion's product. You're going to hear a lot of kind of anecdotes about my previous role and some of the struggles I had that helped inform a lot of this presentation today. So with that, I will kick off the agenda here if it'll let me navigate. Awesome. So as I teed up, we'll do a quick introduction over this concept of the future of FinOps is CloudOps. For a few of you that maybe attended a prior session, that content is going to be more of a trimmed down version for today's audience. And if you're obviously interested to learn more or talk more about it, I'm happy to do so outside of this presentation. But we'll tee up, why we think CloudOps and FinOps collaboration is so important. And then we'll jump into kind of the meat of today's presentation, which is all about waste. And we'll talk about the problem and we'll define it. We'll talk about what I believe the solution to alleviating some of that waste is. And then we'll talk about how and some next steps for you all. And then we'll kind of end with a brief what's new and next in Kion specifically. And then my goal is to still leave plenty of time for Q&A. I've got Zoom open, and so if you want to submit questions during, I probably will save them till the end, but please feel free to throw in any questions about any of the content you see today, and we'll talk about it at the end. Great. So let's jump into this idea of the future of FinOps is CloudOps. And really what I want to convey here is that when you think about all the things it takes to manage your cloud infrastructure or your FinOps practices, there's a lot that goes on, and there's a lot of collaboration that needs to take place. And one of the things that I learned kind of early in my career, and I'm seeing it now with current customers or prospective customers, is that there often is a overlooked kind of gap in what I would say the utilizing the function of a CloudOps team. And I think with the way that FinOps and cloud infrastructure is growing, the emergence of AI, CloudOps teams are going to be completely essential to maximizing the value of your cloud. And so to walk you through, why it is that we believe that here at Kion, let's take a step back and define FinOps. I assume most of you that are on this call have at least some familiarity, if not a deep familiarity, with FinOps. So this is going to be a very macro view. But if you think about what FinOps ultimately is, I've bolded some words of the definition down there. It's ultimately maximizing the business value of your cloud through collaboration. You do that. There's a lot of specifics about how and things like that that are done through the phases of FinOps, which is the inform, optimize, and operate phase. But ultimately, the goal is to maximize the value you're getting from your cloud. And that introduces kind of a principle of FinOps, which is that it's everyone's job. And what I want to highlight here is that when we talk about how it's everyone's job, that means more than just spend. And I think a big thing and a big takeaway I want to get across is that FinOps is not just trying to save dollars and cents. It's about value, and value can look like a lot of things. That can be making a process a little bit more efficient, making someone's job a little bit easier to get done, and it can also mean trying to save a little bit of money. And so to do that, collaboration is critical. The image that's on the screen is straight from the FinOps Foundation, where they kind of define the core personas and allied personas. But the point of that graphic is that everyone on this slide plays a role in FinOps. And one of the things that I find interesting, and I've been learning over the last year, is that some of the roles that are played in FinOps are obvious, and some are maybe less obvious. And so, to highlight maybe an obvious couple, when you think about how do people contribute to FinOps at their organization. So you've got procurement, right? Their role, or one of their roles, would be negotiating better rates with the cloud service providers. Your finance team is responsible for cloud budgeting and forecasting. And then even at the leadership level, a decision such as we're going to be multi-cloud or we're going to be single cloud, whatever it may be, all has a huge impact on your FinOps practice and kind of how you move forward. What I find interesting, though, is that sometimes folks kind of overlook some other roles on this slide. And that's where I kind of introduce this idea of the CloudOps team. And so for the sake of this graphic, you can think of that engineering section. And so I throw up the example here of a CloudOps team implementing tagging automation. On the surface, right, tagging automation isn't necessarily saving you any money. But what it is doing is, for one, it's allowing engineers to go about doing their job more efficiently. They're having to think less about, did I tag this instance? Do I have to go back and manually tag this instance? It's also allowing your FinOps team and your finance team to trust the chargeback process a little bit more. When you have automated tagging, you worry a little bit less if things are appropriately tagged because you've built an automation. And so I use that as an example because it has nothing to do with saving money, but it creates a lot of value for the organization. And so I tee that up to walk you through a real example. And so this was several years ago. AI, kind of the early stages-ish of AI, were taking off. And in my previous company, we decided we were going to kick off this big initiative on how blockchain might impact, the revenue for one of our applications. And so when you think about the life cycle that you kick off and start to go through, that starts with an idea, right? Product or business wants to kick off this AI, test case, right? From there, you need a cloud account to be able to, basically test out your theory. And so that goes to the CloudOps team, who's expected to provision that sandbox account. For us, especially at this time, when we provision an account, there wasn't really any guardrails or like what are the baselines for this account. There's definitely no policies in terms of like, this is what's expected behavior, this is what's allowed behavior. There's no budgeting at the beginning of an account lifecycle. And for us and for many organizations, just provisioning an account can take days or weeks. In this particular case, this was a kind of a high impact, high visibility type of initiative. And so we probably cut a few corners in our normal processes to try to actually get this account up and running faster than it normally would have. And so we gave out access, kind of a blanket access to this large engineering group. And the account gets provisioned, engineering starts development. And what actually happened in this particular use case is that a newer junior engineer, basically 3 days, I think, into the account existing, was kind of playing around in this sandbox. And at the time, spun up one of the larger, more expensive instances that AWS offers and left it running over the weekend. And I come into work on a Monday morning and I see this $50,000 spike. And not only is the potential spike concerning and trying to see if we can delete this, waste or what it is, because this account was brand new, there was no track record of who even owned the account. There was no tagging on any of the instances. And so I'm left in this discovery phase of trying to even figure out who owns it, let alone is it waste and can it be deleted. This was a pretty pivotal story, both in my FinOps career in terms of how I started to think about how we could be better and how organizations can be better. And it really caused us to reevaluate what could we be doing to prevent stories like this. I'm sure many of you that are on this call, it may not be this exact use case, but everyone can probably relate to something like this. And what I now want to walk you through, and something that we learned as we kind of did some root cause analysis of this, is the importance of CloudOps in this role and why having your CloudOps team at the center of your FinOps processes is so important. And so let's reset the stage now with CloudOps. Same idea. The business kicks off an idea for this AI initiative. But now when we go to provision the sandbox account, a couple things happen. We make sure least privilege access is in place. All that means is that the people who should have access don't have any more or any less access than they need to get their job done. We have tagging automation in place. So as the account gets spun up, we say these are the key value pairs that we expect to exist for any resource that is spun up in this account. And then we put in some financial policies. For something like a sandbox account, that might be a hard threshold of, hey, we want to spend $500 a day. After that, we want to shut everything down. Or in the case like I just laid out, it was just simply we needed some weekend termination policies, right? It was a sandbox account. There was no reason to have resources running over the weekend. And so you put in some financial policies on the account from the very beginning so things like that aren't allowed to happen. And then the last piece is when you automate things like your account provisioning process, you go from this days or weeks of people waiting to actually do their job to being able to start their job in minutes. So now in this case, these things are done. Engineering starts development the same day, and I don't come into work on a Monday morning and see this $50,000 spike. And so I paint this picture because with CloudOps, you're essentially ensuring proper access control, visibility into ownership, and you're creating guardrails for your spend. That's ultimately going to reduce your risk of cost overruns and enhance your overall FinOps practice. And so I walk you through that story and I'll summarize it on this slide of essentially why we think FinOps is better off with CloudOps. And the first is they have different strengths. If you think about the three phases of FinOps, and you think about what is supposed to take place in the operate phase, it's all about governance policies, creating automation, essentially setting yourself up for long-term success. And I think CloudOps teams are uniquely suited to essentially manage that phase because they specialize in governance and automation. And part of automation is that idea of optimizing process, not just spend. So being able to automate something like tagging, right, means less time someone having to go back and worry about manually tagging an instance, and it's going to mean more time adding value. And then lastly, it helps eliminate risk. So when you have repeatable, consistent, automated processes, and you have those proactive guardrails, you're not only securing your cloud from a security standpoint, right, and ensuring that you've got proper and least privileged access, but you're also securing your cloud budget. And so I set all this up to say this is why we think the future of FinOps is CloudOps and why we think these teams are so important. And I should have said this at the beginning, but I recognize some organizations call CloudOps something a little different. It might just be cloud engineering. It could look like DevOps. It could look like a lot of things. But every organization has a team or a person who kind of sits in the center of everything. And we think those folks need to be more involved to make FinOps truly more successful. So with that, that's the preamble, I suppose, on the future of FinOps. But now, kind of why I assume a lot of you are here, which is specifically, let's dive into waste. And this idea of eliminating waste is great, but preventing it is even better. And so to do that, let's first kind of define the problem and let's talk about what waste is. I'm going to define it as anything that doesn't provide business value. And business value can look like time or it can look like money, right? Either one is waste. And some common examples that I'm sure everybody can relate to. There's unused resources, so things that are idle and decommission opportunities. There's underutilized resources, so think of your right sizing opportunities. But there's also things like resources being misallocated. One of the ways that I actually got started in FinOps is because when we were brand new to the cloud, we realized we were completely misallocating spend through our chargeback process. And what we found is that we actually were overcharging some of our products to such a degree that it was distorting profit margin. We were misaligned on where our budgets and resources were being put. And we actually had to completely undo that process to make sure we had accurate financials for our applications. And so inaccurate chargeback is a huge wasted problem that we dealt with and many organizations do today. And then the last one, inefficient use of time. So anywhere you've got a slow manual process, every organization has them. Those are places where waste exists. And so when you think about the public cloud, it's projected that it's going to reach over 300 billion this year. And that number is specific to kind of your major cloud providers. That's not including all of the spend for like a SaaS or third-party type of tool. This is the public cloud, your Google, AWS, Azure, Oracle, et cetera spend. And One of the ways that it's being driven is through AI's emergence, right? AI is a hot topic. Um, that's expected to drive about a 20% increase year over year. And what I find interesting about that is that the innovation part of AI is not the only reason cost is going up. There's also this lack of education, right? Understanding what these services are, or how we should manage them, and ultimately how we should govern them. And so all of this leads to it's estimated that about a 30% of all public cloud spend is waste. There are figures of 20 to 50%, depending on what site and what source you want to use. I picked somewhere kind of conservatively in the middle with 30%. But when you think about that, that means essentially over the course of this year, somewhere around $90 billion is going to be wasted. And the first two reasons I think are pretty obvious. It's easy to spend money in the cloud. There's a reason these cloud providers make a lot of money, right? It's easy to spin something up. It's the new technologies like AI. But a big one, and part of the core reason that I wanted to give this webinar is something I'm calling an acceptance of the complexity. I both saw it as a practitioner and I see it today with organizations where this idea that the cloud is really difficult to manage. There's a lot going on, and so waste is inevitable, right? And so we're just going to react to it. It kind of proposes this question of is waste solvable? And that's where I want to come around to this idea that part of our problem with waste is just our mindset. And when you think about where we are today, education on how the cloud works and cloud economics and FinOps and even the tool features we have at our fingertips is all at an all-time high, right? So why is waste getting worse? Well, one of the reasons is that a majority of organizations are relying on tools to just identify the waste. What that means is, as we have these tools that tell us all the ways that we could be saving money, in order to do that, the validations manual, as your cloud scales, that problem of solving your waste and going through opportunities that have been identified gets harder to scale. And ultimately, this is just focused on dollars and cents, and it's not focused on kind of the bigger picture process inefficiencies. And that leads me to this how I would say the current mindset is backwards, which is that we're investing a lot of time, and I say the broader we, right? FinOps in general is investing a lot of time into reacting and optimizing after something has already existed. And I think we have an opportunity to rethink that process and invest that same amount of time into proactive automation. And I think this lack of proactive governance is ultimately what creates such a large number of wasted spend, lost time, and inconsistent results. And so when you think about waste, some cloud waste is definitely inevitable. But I believe, and Kion believes, that it can significantly be reduced with proactive guardrails. And so as I transition here and we start talking about the solution and what this means and what this could look like, I'm going to share another story, and we're going to come back to this in a moment, and I'm going to demo how Kion can solve this. But to tee it up, this is a common example of waste. Every organization at some point probably had some unattached DBS volumes. It was definitely a problem back in the day. But what I want to highlight here is that when I was getting started and we were going to the cloud for the first time, we started noticing these unattached DBS volumes. At the time, they were about $500 a month. We had a tool that identified them for us. But one of the challenges we had is that at the time we had no tagging. And so it made, who owns these volumes or who owned the instance it was attached to. It made finding that person difficult. And when you think about a single volume, the spend is probably not that material, right? And so each individual volume wasn't worth chasing down. But what happens is these start to pile up, right? And one volume becomes two, becomes 20, becomes 10,000. And each of them, right, pile up day over day. And now the waste that you're looking at is pretty substantial. We tried to solve it with a solution at the time, which was, hey, we're finally going to get around to having a tagging policy. Here are the key values that we expect on every resource in the cloud. And we put in a governance policy that said, hey, anytime an EBS volume exists for more than 7 days, let's delete it. The problem is, and what happened, and ultimately created the longer term worst problem, is that we wrote these policies and we communicated them, but there was no action. There was no automation tied to these. It was more of like, this is our policy, and no one listened. These volumes piled up to, I actually think it ended up being closer to 30,000, but I was conservative with my estimate here. And we at one point had over 20,000 a month in just wasted EBS volumes. And what's difficult here is the longer it sits, the harder it can be to delete something because the folks who are responsible or owned it have moved on, lost the context, or no longer even work at the company. And you still have that problem of what used to be a couple hundred volumes is now a couple thousand. And the idea of chasing all of those down is not something that's sustainable and even possible. And that type of issue is what brings me to what I believe the solution for a lot of this waste that we see at organizations. And it's this idea of policy and automation. And so when you think about policy and you combine it with automation, you create these guardrails that ultimately are going to maximize the value for your organization. And so to walk you all through kind of what this looks like, you have to start with actually creating policy. And so when you think about a FinOps policy, it's not that much different than a compliance or regulation policy, but has a little bit, a couple differences. And so the first is that it's got to be collaborative. When you think about all those stakeholders that I shared at the beginning of this presentation, everyone kind of needs a seat at the table when you're deciding what the policies for your organization are or should be. From there, they need to be business driven and enablement focused. And what I mean by that is every organization has a different set of challenges. Their applications or products have different needs in terms of how long, retention of data should exist, things of that nature. And they need to be enablement focused because we're not trying to create policies that make people's jobs harder. We're trying to create policies that make people's jobs easier. And so thinking of these FinOps policies in that frame of reference is really important. And then lastly, I threw up some target areas. So these are like common ones that you see that I threw just to get your frame of reference as we keep moving through this presentation. But some general areas that folks should and do create FinOps policies for are things like how long do you retain your storage? What are your tagging requirements for your organization? What does utilization look like for an application, right? What's an acceptable amount of CPU or memory, and what thresholds do you want to set as your baselines? What does unused mean at your organization? For us, we tried to say like the snapshot example or the volume example, 7 days was what we defined waste. Every organization might look a little bit different, but defining what that means to you is important on the front end. And then something like account provisioning, right? Automating that process, helping engineers get to the cloud faster. These are all kind of areas that you can start when you're thinking about how to create policy. Ultimately, that policy becomes automated guardrails when it's paired with automation. And it introduces this idea of proactive FinOps, which is something I'm really passionate about. And it's kind of a version of what I was talking about with CloudOps, right? This is what I think the future of FinOps is going to look like. When you take these policies and you put automation around them, you start to actually prevent waste before it ever exists. Those cost overruns don't happen and your inefficiencies disappear. You start to save time and you produce consistent results. I think one of the things that is hidden in all of this is, when your finance teams or your leadership is trying to figure out budgeting and forecasting, and you've got all this waste out there, it's hard to actually know what your true run rate or your true budget is. And so something as simple as just like producing a more consistent budget estimate is all part of this as well. Um, it's more time to focus on value add work. I really want to like sit here for a second because I think that sounds great at a macro level, but you think about what that really means. If you don't have, let's say, engineers who are constantly having to um, essentially focus on tasks that aren't building revenue generating products, when you force them to actually go through tagging efforts or cleaning up waste or verifying if something can be right sized and you automate those processes, they then spend more time working on things that are generating value for your organization. And then the last piece here is just it's a higher confidence in your cloud. So when you have these automated policies in action and these guardrails, you have a higher trust that you're eliminating waste and you're taking care. Sorry, I will. That question popped up on my screen, distracted me. Sorry about that. Michael, we'll talk about it at the end. But it's a higher confidence in your cloud. And what this looks like is tagging automation. It looks like cost avoidance. It looks like lifecycle management, and it looks like more efficient processes. And that is what proactive FinOps ultimately looks like. And so when you think about the value that you're then going to get from this type of approach, I'm going to throw a couple of examples up here that are specific to Kion customers. So, these are just real examples that I can prove. This is not Um, going to, depending on your organization, your scale might be smaller or larger, and your ROI might look different. But a couple of use cases of where this has shown real ROI. So 10x faster processes and time to value. We've got a customer who, through using Kion and using this idea of automation, has essentially 10x their ability to get to the cloud faster, right? And have engineers start generating revenue and building products. We've got a customer who recently reported through automation, they've verified that they're saving 80 hours per month on labor. So what was taking someone 2 weeks of their job to do has now been automated, and they're able to go do something else that's adding value to the organization. And then the last piece is 100% waste reduction for that low-hanging fruit. I said at the beginning that waste is inevitable, right? But there are things that is truly preventable. And when you have a policy like such as what is an unused resource at your organization, and you've got these dev and sandbox environments where there's no reason that waste should ever exist, having automation in place to delete it from the moment it's detected is a way to avoid that cost, increase your ROI, and increase your value for your organization. So I know I've been talking for several minutes in a row now. I am going to now do a demo. Before I do the demo, I threw up this graph here because what I'm trying to convey here is how important it is anytime you can delete or prevent waste on day one, and you don't have that example like I talked about earlier, where EBS volumes exist for days and days and days, and they pile on top of each other. You're able to create what I would consider a transformational ROI on your cloud. And so I do want to quickly show how a tool like Kion can make this possible. So I will, if this will work. Awesome. So for those of you on this webinar that are unfamiliar with Kion, not Kion customers, this is not going to be a full demo of Kion. If you're interested, happy to set that up afterwards. But what I am showing right now on the screen is something we call compliance checks. And think of compliance checks as policy, right? These are the policies that I'm advocating organizations start to define, document. And in Kion, you're allowed to create those, and these ultimately can take some sort of action within your cloud infrastructure. And on the screen, I have two compliance checks. This first one is a compliance check focused on actually deleting EBS volumes that are greater than 7 days. And this other is just trying to identify them. And what I want to highlight, so I'm going to click in here, is that so this policy is cloud custodian. It's other than folks that are not familiar with that, it's pretty simple to put together. It's something that we can also help our customers put together. But all it's doing is saying we've defined how long a volume should exist before it's defined as waste. And we also, in this case, you'll see we put in a tag, Kion preserve. And so essentially, anytime we don't see that tag in our own infrastructure, we delete the unattached EBS volume. And to show that this works, just yesterday, we went in and purposely created two unattached volumes. And what you're seeing on the screen is that yesterday at 10 a.m., these volumes were found. Due to the frequency of scans, it can take a couple minutes. It's user-driven on how often you want Kion to scan. But they were found yesterday at 10 a.m. And by 10:18 a.m., these two volumes were deleted automatically. And I share that example because I want to show kind of the inverse, which is if I go back to this policy here that's just identifying, and I click in and I go to my findings, you'll see that I have an active finding right now with an unattached EBS volume sitting in one of our accounts. And for this to now have action taken on it, myself, an engineer, whoever it may be, needs to go in, investigate, find out details about what this is, and they probably don't have the authority, unless they directly own it, to actually delete it. And these types of things, this example of waste, I know this is a specific one, but there's many versions of this where these things linger, right? It takes time to verify, it takes time to delete them. And this is a test environment where this idea of waste should never exist, right? It's low-hanging fruit. And so I share this as just a quick example of how a tool like Kion, right, can actually create automation for you. You don't even have to think about this waste. It's automatically deleted for you. I heard actually recently someone talk about the excitement of when you find an opportunity and you delete it. They called it like a dopamine effect of, well, I'm now deleted and I'm now saving money. And that is great. But I actually think we should be celebrating when we don't find opportunities, right? I think to show as this as an example, when I come here and I see that I have no active findings, that means I'm avoiding cost that never was allowed to exist. And that should be the goal, is actually to never even see an opportunity. The more opportunities we have, the more waste that's probably out there lingering that we're not taking action on. So for those of you that are new to Kion, happy to, after this call, talk more about our feature set and things of that nature. But I just wanted to quickly highlight, this is a real world example that we're using in our own, cloud accounts today. And so with that, let me jump back to the presentation if I can. Awesome. We're doing okay on time. Yeah. Okay. So some next steps for you. These are somewhat high level, and I've broken it down into everyone and Kion customers. And so we'll start with for everyone. Um, First step is identifying what waste is at your organization, right? What are the areas you're struggling with? Is it that you've got a lot of right sizing opportunities? Is it that you've got snapshots and storage that's years old that needs to be cleaned up? Maybe you just have slow processes, right? And there's things that need to be automated just from a process standpoint. Whatever it is, start to identify what that looks like at your organization, and then start actually drafting policies, right? Start putting down on in a document of what waste looks like at your organization and how you want to define it. And what I think is important here, remind again the importance of aligning this with business objectives, right? How do we create the most amount of value for our business? And writing these policies with that in mind first, but then allowing your security teams and your CloudOps teams to refine those policies in terms of what's technically feasible and what's obtainable, and collaboratively work together to define good quality policies at your organization. From there, invest the time into automation. I know I stated this at the beginning, but to me, it's not actually creating space for new time. It's just replacing the time that we're currently putting into reactive optimization and taking those hours and doing a one-time investment into the automation of those efforts. And so a couple things you have to do. You got to have a line on the tool you're going to use to do this. That can be homegrown, that can be native, that could be a third-party tool like Kion, whatever it is. You do need something to basically help make this a reality. And then once you align on that, empower your CloudOps teams to kind of come full circle back to their importance. Allow them to build out this automation and scale this at your organization. And lastly, you're never done with these. So continuously monitor and refine. Something that we used to do is kind of monthly or quarterly check-ins on what's working, what's not working, where could we, enhance a policy where we used to define something as, an RDS database is waste after no connection for 30 days. Can we actually tighten that to be 15 days, right? And how much savings can we get by that small tweak? Things of that nature, right? Constantly revisit these with your stakeholders. For Kion customers, continue, or for some of you, begin taking more advantage of these CloudOps features, whether it's custom variables, which is automated tagging, compliance checks, which I was just demoing, right? This idea of creating policy within Kion and then attaching them to cloud rules, which actually allow you to take action and put guardrails around your spend, take advantage of them, and then off of that, provide us feedback, right? For the customers on the call, there's several of you that I've met with multiple times at this point, but there's still customers that I haven't had the opportunity to meet and chat through. Email me directly, talk to your delivery and support contacts, whatever it is, but share us feedback on what else we could be doing to improve these features, increase the ability to save waste and prevent waste in your organization. Always happy to have that conversation and figure out how we can also do better. And then before I go here, I do want to do some 4 big takeaways, and then we'll do some Q&A. But big takeaways for everyone, high level, is that if you leave here remembering anything, remember that FinOps is more than spend. It's about maximizing value of all your processes when you're managing your cloud infrastructure. Proactive FinOps. Proactive FinOps is essentially policy plus automation, and we think that's the future for organizations trying to achieve sustainable long-term cloud efficiency. Think of guardrails as enablers, right? The right guardrails are enabling everyone to be more successful and creating more investment, more value from your cloud investment. Policy is not blockers. Policy is making everybody's life a little bit easier and making processes a little bit better. And I think it's important to have that kind of frame of mind when putting these in place. And then lastly is a little bit of a challenge. If you're an organization and you're listening to me give this talk and you're thinking that this is like pie in the sky, automation, it will never work here, I would challenge you to assess your current gaps and just try to find something that could be automated. Even if it's small, just start, right? And if Kyan can help, that's even better. But I do want to challenge everyone to start thinking a little bit differently and see if there's somewhere to start creating real automation in your organization. Um, Before we officially go to Q&A, I've got one slide on what's new and next in Kion. We do have a new release planned to come out next week. It's to be 3.12 for your current Kion customers. And so a quick what's new and next in that. So in 3.12, you're going to see overall an improved FinOps experience. And what that means is you're going to see a really exciting, customizable way to schedule reports via email. You're going to see customization over frequency and messages, and you're going to see multiple export types available. Really excited for how the PDF has turned out. I think it's going to make quick visuals and quick sharing of information to executives that much easier, and it's going to push cost accountability right to people's inboxes in a better, more efficient way. We're really, really excited about it. Teams have been working hard on it, and I know for our current customers, they've been waiting on this, and we're excited to finally provide it. Lastly, this part's a little vague, but we've done a lot of usability improvements to our spin reporting. We've just made it a more lovable place to be, and we're excited about just increased granularity and the detail that we've brought to spin reports. And so I'm excited for folks to get to test it out. Um, Up next for us, so handful of things. Billing adjustments. So this is actively in the works right now. This is allowing folks more options to customize their spend, fit whatever use cases they may have, whether it's a reseller or just certain things they want to do within their own internal organization to customize the billing coming from the cloud providers. Customize enforcement messaging. So just more customization on the message that users are receiving when they get a notification from Kion. Improved forecasting and enhanced anomaly detection. So these are two areas that we really want to spend time in this year and make that experience better for our customers. And we've got some really exciting ideas for how we're going to bring that to life. And then the last one is continued usability upgrades. We've got lots of great ideas for how Kion can be quicker and better and more lovable for our users. And so I expect to see those throughout the coming months as well. And so with that, I know that's 40 minutes of me talking. I hope it was somewhat enjoyable and you learned something today, but I do want to take a moment now to do some Q&A. So let me see here. I know there was one question in the Q&A and then I see some chats. So um, let me start here. So I see Pablo, where do you see potential savings before acting on a finding? For example, with the EBS example, where do you see the value of what is costing me to maintain these volumes that are not being deleted today? So, believe the so Pablo, is your question like how do I see the like ROI of what my effort is, I suppose, if that's your question. So like today, right? Yeah. So a tool that's going to identify opportunities for you, which Kion also does identification, right? It will identify a savings opportunity, and let's say an individual volume is $30 a month. Um, you can think about your ROI as if my EBS volume, an individual volume, is $30 a month, and I automatically delete that before it ever exists, over a year, right? You can map out what that cost would be. You can multiply it by all the EBS volumes in that example, right, that you might have out there. It is one of those things where it's harder to frame your mindset sometimes when you think about, well, if I'm avoiding cost and I'm saving money, it is harder to prove it when you're preventing it from ever existing. But that's why I was saying at the beginning, like um, almost not having any savings opportunities is a good thing, right? It means you're preventing waste and you're more efficient. So I don't know if that fully answered your question there, but hopefully it did. And then um, Michael. what type of alerts can you enable to identify zombie instances, or how do you define it now? So um, Mike, are you just saying like for zombie instances, just things that truly aren't used? If so, a couple things you can do. I know in my past life, that starts most tools that you start with like CPU percentage, right? Like, is it never getting above 10%, something like that as an initial indicator? One of the things that we used to do, and we found a lot of value on the database side, we used to look at, did this RDS instance, has it had a connection in the last 15, 30 days? And if it didn't have a single connection, right, that often meant, especially in lower environments and non-production, that it was something that truly was waste. And so I think it looks a little different at every organization in terms of like what you define as zombie, but there are definitely parameters that you can write in a cloud custodian script through Kion or whatever it may be, that helps you identify those and take action. Um, and then Jeffrey, do you guys support SAML 2.0 for authentication? Um, I believe so. I think, do we have our DNS folks on the call to just confirm that? Um, yeah, thanks, Randy. Yes, we do. Cool. Um, I think that is all the questions I see in the chat. Um, I do, I'll move forward here. For folks that I'm not connected with on LinkedIn, but want to have or continue the conversation, if you heard something you found interesting today or something you even want to challenge me on, always open to having those conversations and whatnot. I hope you took something away today. Um, I was trying to see actually. Um, I realized that I did not do something I meant to do at the beginning of this call. Um, I know in the poll that we threw up at the start, it was asking if folks came to the uh, State of FinOps report this morning. For those of you that don't know what this is, I'm going to share it in the chat. And actually, yes, I think we should be able to share the PowerPoint. I'll chat with our marketing folks and see if we can send that out in a follow up. But if you go to the link I just put in the chat, you're going to see that today the FinOps Foundation released the new State of FinOps 2025 report. And in this, they do this every year. It's a lot of good content. It's basically representing, feedback from all practitioners in terms of like what are their pain points, what are they concerned about, things of that nature. And one of the things that I selfishly am very excited to see, because it kind of fed right into the webinar topic today, is that when you look at both current priorities and future priorities, the very, very top is all about FinOps governance and policy at scale and waste reduction, which I didn't know these results were coming the same day as the webinar, but it just shows that this is a real problem that folks are looking for solutions on. Folks are looking for ways to reduce waste. They're looking for ways to put in governance and policy to prevent that waste. And so it's a big pain point. It's going to continue to come up, and I'm excited that Kion is at the forefront of trying to help folks solve this and continue trying to make it better. So with that, if there, oh, I see Alex had another question here. Um, how do we see resources based on our metadata? So Alex, if that's a question about Kion specifically, there's several ways you can do that. There's everything from resource inventory, which is showing some metadata or showing all the metadata on a resource. Kion is as a product, we have what's called an org chart, which is where folks put it in, whether it's business units or by environment, such as region, or production or development, different things of that nature. So I don't know if your question was specifically about Kion, but we offer multiple ways to basically verify metadata, such as tagging, et cetera. Would your compliance tools be a separate webinar to dive into? That's good feedback. We definitely could. And we've got a few folks at Kion who have done a lot of really cool and creative things with compliance checks to basically create really powerful policies for customers. And so we've got some folks who could really give a great demo on the possibilities of those things. And so that's good feedback, Michael, for sharing. We could definitely think about our next one um, being more, compliance driven. Our plan is to do three more of these this year, all kind of centered around this idea of the future of FinOps is CloudOps and ways that that looks like. And so maybe compliance deep dive is a good topic for our next one. So appreciate you sharing that. Awesome. Okay. Well, I'm out of breath from talking for 45 minutes, but I really appreciate the questions and the chat engagement. Anna confirmed we'll share the PowerPoint in the follow-up email. So yeah, really appreciate everybody and your time today and look forward to continuing the conversation. So thanks all.